Welcome to day 24 of reading every single day for the rest of my life. Today we got Discipline is Destiny. I'm way more than halfway through the book. I really, really love it already. I've been loving it. And yeah, we're going to get started. I'm going to set 30 minutes right now. All right, here we go. 30 minutes starting now. If the first step is showing up, committing to doing something each day, then the next step is finding something to focus on getting better at each day. And in this, where cumulative improvement meets compounding returns, we can harness one of the most powerful forces on earth. Think about it. Most people don't even show up. Of the people who do, most don't really push themselves. To show up and be disciplined about daily movement, you are the rarest of the rare. And if improvement sounds difficult, how about just making fewer mistakes? This is what Gehrig's manager has said about him. The secret to Gehrig's incredible trajectory as an athlete wasn't just his commitment; it was that he never made the same mistake twice. The guy who began his career blowing at least one play per inning improved to one mistake per game, to one per week, to one per month. To err is human, but to err each less is to become closer to the divine. We not only hold ourselves to a standard, but we ratchet the standard up as we go. Just as the weight training, what we're lifting should be steadily increasing with each subsequent workout. Our willingness to be satisfied with our performance, to be done with our progress, is what keeps us from plateauing. It drives us forward. Is it a little discouraging that we never seem to arrive? That our standards rise just out of reach of our abilities? Absolutely not. We move the goalposts so the game doesn't get boring, and more important, so it never ends. Ultimately, this brings us more pleasure and more satisfaction. We reached heights as we never have been able to see otherwise. Do you want to be rotting or ripening? Are you getting better? Because if you're not, then you're probably getting worse. Anyone, whether they're a professional athlete or a house cleaner, can get better at their job. You can get better at being a person. You can get better at being a person, a citizen, or a son or a daughter. You can get better at how you think, how you focus, or what you think about. Just taking a sip of this Red Bull. If I were to rate it, probably an like a 6, a 5. Honestly, it's not that good. It's good, but it's not that. It's mid. Um, just as one person delights in improving his farm in another horse, Epictetus would say, riffing as it happens on Socrates, so I delight in attending to my improvement day by day. He said this as a man who clawed his way out of slavery. He said this from exile. He said this as one of the wisest men in the ancient world, and still he was focused on how he could get better every day in every way. One can imagine that for Epictetus, this discipline would have been extremely helpful in those dark times, because it gave him something to focus on, something only he controlled, not his master, not society, not his station in life. But this discipline is also helpful in the good times, too, preventing one from getting too cocky or complacent. It doesn't matter what the scoreboard says, or the blankets, or the blank, or the bank balance, or the sales figure, or the headlines. You know. You know whether you're getting better or worse, whether you're making progress day to day. And if we are, wonderful. If you know there is room for improvement, also wonderful. Either way, your marching orders are the same. Come what may, success or failure, fame or misfortune, a focus on progress lets us look ourselves in the mirror with pride and ignore all the commotion in the background. It's the journey of a lifetime. In fact, it's the way that you think about this. How much progress could you make if it made just a little each day, even if it made just a little each day over the course of your entire life? What might this journey look like? What might it lead? If each bit of progress you made presented both the opportunity and the obligation to make a little more progress, and you seized those opportunities, you lived up to those obligations each and every time. Will you choose to take this journey? Will you continue even when you reach further than you ever thought you could go? Or will you stop there? Are you going to keep practicing, or have you decided this is good enough? That you're good enough? Will you remain as you are, or become what you're capable of? Because once you stop getting better, there's only one direction to go. Do the best you can, the Emperor says in Margaret Yersin's beautiful novel, Memoirs of Hadrian. Do it over again, then still improve, even if you're so slightly those retouches. It's a beautiful irony. You're never content with your progress, and yet you're always content because you're making progress. Share the load. I just lost my bait, bro. Okay. In 1956, Harry Belafonte placed a call to Coretta Scott King. With her husband arrested once again, he was checking on her and whether the movement might need anything. But the two of them could barely carry on a conversation because Coretta was continually getting pulled away from the phone to attend one of the children to take dinner out of the oven. To answer the door, sensing she was doing all this alone, Belafonte politely asked why the Kings did not have any help at home. Well, she told them, Martin simply would not permit it. Such a luxury was a stretch on minister's salary. They were worried people might judge them. It felt wrong for the Kings to do so, indulge themselves, while millions of black people suffered. That is absolutely ridiculous, Belafonte replied. He's here in the middle of the movement doing all these things, and he is going to get caught up in what people are going to think of he has somebody helping you. Going to think if he has somebody helping you. Your life is going to change right now, Belafonte told her. You would personally pay for staff, and Martin and absolutely no one in the matter. This wasn't just a nice gesture to an overworked family, it was also a strategic move. What Belafonte was buying Martin and Coretta was not just help, it was time, it was peace of mind, it was protection. He knew that with help, they would have more energy, more focus for the cause. They'd be stronger and more effective. The last thing he wanted Martin Luther King Jr. to worry about as he marched for peace and justice, whether there was milk in the fridge. It takes discipline not to insist on doing everything yourself, especially when you know how to do many of those things well, especially when you have high standards and about how they should be done. Even if you enjoy doing them, whether that's mowing your lawn, writing your speeches, making your schedule, or answering your phone. As Polar Charts reminds us, while a leader must know how to do anything, they cannot conceivably do everything. It's not physically possible. It's not mentally possible. Often the best way to manage the load is to share the load. Woe is the person who wears themselves out on the trivial matters and then, when big moments come, is out of energy. Woe is the person and the people around them who is constantly exhausted and strung out because they have taken everything upon themselves that now, when things go wrong, there's no slack or cushion to absorb the additional stress. A glutton isn't just someone who eats or drinks too much. Some of us are also gluttons for punishment. Glutton for control, glutton for work. What makes this so tricky to identify, let alone to manage, is that it often comes from a good place. As it did for Martin Luther King Jr., we feel obligated. We feel bad spending money. We feel guilty asking for help, no matter how well-intentioned. The outcome is the same. We wear ourselves down. We harm ourselves. We harm the cause. We neglect the main thing. We end up depriving the world of progress, of the benefits of what economists call the law of comparative advantage. You have to be able to pass the ball, especially with somebody when somebody is open and has a better shot. You have to be able to share the minute with other players, as those Spurs started willing to do, because that's what teams do. The insecure are unable to do this. They fear being criticized. They fear letting people see behind the scenes. Tyrants are unable to do this. Egotists are unable to do this. The cheap are unable to do this. They want it all for themselves. They aren't strong enough to bear anything but the center. The exclusive, the sound soul source of achievement. And what happens to the most tyrannical regimes? They fail. It doesn't make sense to try to do everything yourself. You have to delegate. You have to find people who are good at things and empower them to help you. You have to be strong enough to hand over the keys, to relinquish control, to develop a system, to organize. That is bigger than just us. If you want to keep the main Maybe you need to hire someone who can be a buffer for you, someone who says no for you. Our willpower is not enough. We shouldn't have to just gut it out. We need to share, that is, if you're trying to scale, trying to build or do something that matters, something bigger than just you. There's a certain amount of privilege in this, sure. Not all of us can afford to hire full-time staff or have a patron willing to pick up the tab. But each of us know that what an hour of a time is worth. We have the quiet discipline to figure out how to spend the time and how to invest the fruit it bears. No matter how successful and important you are, we have tasks that can be automated. We all have tasks that can be automated. We all have legacy tasks that ought to be resigned. Everything in life is a team sport. You know these inefficiencies exist, and yet you refuse to delegate them. You continue to try to do everyone's job. Stop procrastinating, delegate. This will not be cheap, and it will be ignorant to insist otherwise. But the value is virtually incalculable because it affords you the most expensive thing in the world, time. By compelling Martin Luther King Jr. to delegate, Belafonte was giving the man, and by extension society, more time to do his essential work. Figuratively, we all face a ticking clock, but King's was strategically shorter. Every minute that he and Coretta didn't have to spend on chores at home was time well spent. But also, what of the time they got spent together? Because delegation doesn't just provide time, but also space, freedom. It allows us to brief, to think, to connect, to appreciate. King was later asked by an interviewer that he would do an uninterrupted week of rest. After scoffing at the pure possibility of such a thing, given the injustices of the world and demands of civil rights movements at the time, King explained what he would do. If I had the luxury of an entire week, I would spend it meditating and reading, refreshing myself spiritually and intellectually, amidst the struggle, amidst the frustrations, amidst the endless work. I often reflect that I am forever giving, never pausing to take in. I feel urgently to need to give an hour of time to get away, to withdraw, to refuel. I need more time to think about through what is being done, to take time out of the mechanics of the movement, to reflect on the meaning of the movement. What would you manage to do with a week like this? With an hour? With a little help that would allow you to carve you some extra time and space for yourself. But not just any kind of time to reflect and think, and not just of any kind of space to learn, space to plan. Together, that little bit of time and space each day combine to form an opportunity to meditate on what is important to us and examine how we're doing in life. You deserve that, but there is only one way you'll get it. It's by delegating. It's by asking for help. It's by making a change. Respect time. As a rookie for the New York Knicks, a young Phil Jackson mostly rode the bench. One night, toward the end of a game, Jackson was in the middle of a conversation with another backup when the coach, Red Halsman, caught him by surprise. "How much time is left, Jackson?" he demanded. 1 minute and 28 seconds, he answered. "No, how much time is on the shot clock?" Red replied, "Of course." Jackson didn't know. "Well, you got to know." And the disgusted coach told him, "You may be going into the game and you don't know the time. You could get us in trouble. Don't let me catch you doing that again." We are all giving the same 24 hours each day, just as each basketball team is giving 24 seconds per session on the court. To not be aware of it, to not respect it, to not know how to use and manage it, it is not just sloppy, it's stupid. You're in the game, always. You've got the time precisely because you will never know when it's going to run out on you. That's what's the reminder, memento mori means. No one can take time or life for granted, as it runs out for all of us. The pursuit of discipline means being disciplined in all things, especially little things, in time, how we spend it. It's tiny increments. It's something that's small that actually amounts to something very large. Some people claim that time is just a construct. If that is true, it is perhaps humanity's greatest creation, because time is the way we measure the only true, non-renewable source we have. No one is making sure of it. Once lost, it cannot be recovered. It is also an incredibly powerful force, as anyone who has ever watched small amounts of interest applied over enough period can attest. You see, time is also wasting on us. When we kill time, we are killing ourselves. We have to learn how to use time, or else it will use us up. That is why we do our work promptly, why we get on the point, why we stick to the agenda, why we don't drone on, why we tolerate digressions or indulge distractions. It's why we keep our desk clean so we don't waste time looking for stuff. It's why we get up early so we have more time. uninterrupted time at the freshest parts of the day. It's why we deliberate what we say yes and no to, because we understand that time is a gift and what we give it matters. Give it to matters. More practically, the poet W.H. Auden said that the modern Stoic knows that the surest way to discipline passion is to discipline time. Decide what you want to ought to do during the day, and always do it exactly the moment every day, and passion will give you no trouble. Now, one doesn't have to follow this advice literally to see the deeper message. Routine is an essential tool in the management of time and the suppression of those negative forces of distraction, procrastination, and laziness. This is true. The person who wakes up whenever, wakes up and does whatever, orders their day however. This person who will never have enough time, who will always be behind, but the more disciplined person, Toni Morrison, who gets up when they ought to be, the person like William Stafford who tackles the hard projects first, who like Booker T. Washington says no to what is not essential. This is a person who makes full use of their time. Take a minute to think about how you spent the last year, the last month, the last week, the last day. Think about how much it was wasted, how much of it was half-assed, how much of it you could have spent in reaction to things out of your control. And even if you have decent results to show for this time, still, you could have done better. We all could have. The moments between the moments we let pass us by, we let pass us by. The things we did lazily had to do again. The things we agreed to that we shouldn't have. We could have done all those things better, except we can't. There is simply no escaping the fact that those moments are gone forever, that you will never get that time back. You missed opportunities to get better. You missed opportunities to make progress. You didn't let patience work to your advantage. You disrespected other people who you made wait. You disrespected your cause, which you deprived of your presence. But the silver lining of the strategy is that life has given you a second chance, at least for now, because you have today, because you have the present moment. How will you spend it? How will you make of it? How will you amount to it? And let's be clear, that doesn't mean just hurrying along. Queen Elizabeth's mother was once rushed along at a public by an aide who claimed they were out of time. Time is not my dictator, the Queen Mother said as she stopped and shook hands with each person who had waited to her. I dictate to time. While time is ultimately the dictator of our presence here on this earth, we do dictate how we spend it, as long as we are aware of it, aware of the value and the importance of managing it well, as long as we are putting it to work for us, even if it's working against us in the mortal sense. Now is the time, because now is the only time you have. George Washington was famous for his reserve, keeping his emotions and personal feelings to himself. Angela Merkel's closest aides have never seen inside her apartment. It's remarkable to think that after an entire lifetime in front of the cameras for Queen Elizabeth, after meeting so many people, after so many appearances and speeches and audiences with world leaders, almost no one can answer that tantalizing, fascinating question. What is the Queen like? Imagine she has never once spoken on the record to a reporter in 7 decades. The Shah of Iran once asked her if, over her reign, she'd had more Labour or Conservative prime ministers. As it happened, the Queen didn't know, because it wasn't her business. It wouldn't have been appropriate. Elizabeth isn't just an observer of the various rules of her profession. Her restraint goes further than just not getting involved in politics. Her grandchildren attest that she rarely gives them explicit advice and never tells them what they must do. Instead, she finds out the right question, or better, just a non-judgmental ear, allows them to figure out for themselves. All this in a word: boundaries. And sadly, this kind of discipline is all too rare these days. In a world full of social media, instant gratification, and the celebration of shamelessness, we don't much respect people who establish and maintain boundaries. Minding your own business, setting the rules of engagement, keeping your private life private, not letting people drag you down into the muck, not getting entangled in other people's dysfunctions or entangling them in yours, being strong enough to communicate what you like and dislike, respecting other people's space and preferences. This is seemingly basic stuff that basically nobody has a handle on. Think of all the words we have to describe people like this: oversharers, hot messes, doormats, drama queens, busybodies, pushovers, shit stirrers, gossip mongers. We live in time of vulgarity and silliness and immaturity and selfishness. a time of freedom that we have to decide is actually license for stupidity, unseriousness, and excess. Look at our heroes, reality, TV stars, influencers, professional wrestlers, YouTubers, demogorgos. These are not heroes, these are cautionary tales. The people we ought to admire are quiet, defined, reserved, serious, professional, respectful for themselves and others. Plutarch reminded us leaders that they were unlikely to warrant much of the way of worship for their subject, that they were too often seen around the fire munching on beans. He was talking about the kind of distance and reserve that Queen Elizabeth and Angela Merkel, George Washington all practiced. Cato, for his part, was an avid defender of what was known as the mors maiorum. You know, the unspoken and yet spoken way of half-life of your grandparents. The unspoken and yet also spoken way of life of your grandparents. Those rules somewhere between manners and morals that tell us how to act, how to treat people, how to carry ourselves, and what to do when you get a speeding ticket, or what to do when there's space between what we can get away with and what the laws or rules say. But it's about more than just that. Boundaries are about drawing some lines around yourself, healthy borders between what you'll share and what you won't, what you'll accept and what you won't, how you treat others and how you expect to be treated. What is this responsibility and what isn't? Or as Jay-Z explained once, particularly in regard to adjusting to success and fame, it's about knowing who you are and just doing what's comfortable for you and not letting people pull you in 1,000 different directions. Because if you allow it, people will have you doing all kinds of stuff because it has to make sense for you. Keeping the main thing is impossible if you're not capable of saying no or pushing back when others push too much on your plate. You can't keep your head about the stressful situations if you have no idea who you are and what you stand for. You can't be a strong parent if you're a mess, if you're still letting your parents walk all over you. How will you get anything done if your temptations on social media rule your life? How can you get back up after a failure if you're already concerned? How can you get back up after a failure if you're overly concerned with what other people think of you? You won't do your best work if you're constantly micromanaging everyone else's. There is a term, energy vampires, meant to describe the kind of people who, because of their lack of boundaries, suck other people dry with their neediness, their selfishness, their dysfunction of their drama. Not only must you not be an energy vampire yourself, but you must be aware that these type of people exist. You must be strong enough to keep them at arm's distance, even if they're beautiful, even if they're talented, even if they're family or friends from childhood, even if their helplessness calls to the most empathetic part of yourself. A country without borders, it has to be said, is not really a country at all. So it goes with people. Without boundaries, we are overwhelmed. We are stretched too thin. So thin that features that previously defined us start to disappear, and there's no telling where we start and the energy vampires around us end. This is why we clean up our desk. This is why we ignore provocations that have nothing to do with us. This is why we don't speak every thought that pops into our head, why we have to figure out how to be responsible with our finances and manage our time efficiently. Why do we go to bed on time, every time, and wake up early every morning? Because we are trying to corral our lives, our emotions, our concerns, in such a way that it's possible to manage them all. That's why we're controlling them instead of the other way around. Understand, most of the people doing important work are people you've never heard of. They want it that way. Most people don't need you to know how happy they are. They aren't thinking about you at all. Everyone is going through something, but some people chose not to vomit their issues on everyone else. The strongest people are self-contained. They keep to themselves in check. They keep their business where it belongs, their business. Is it true that some people will get away with conduct becoming of insert? Yes. They may have even have fun or get rich doing it. And our boundaries leave that concern to time. We know that in the day they are punishing themselves. And they know in the end they are punishing themselves. As William Penn famously said, those with strong boundaries are so much more their own that, paying common dues, they are rulers of all the rest. Set your boundaries, enforce them, gently but firmly. Treat everyone else's with much respect as you'd want for your own. Be the adult in a world of emotional children. That's a good line. Be the adult in a world full of emotional children. Do your best. A promising young officer named Jimmy Carter was applying for a young spot in the Navy nuclear submarine program. There he sat for more than 2 hours across Admiral Hyman Rickover, who has not only created the first nuclear navy through sheer willpower in 1955, but he ran it with an intense focus for the next 3 decades, which included interviewing in person every single person who could touch his prize submarines. As they sat and talked, they covered a wide range of topics that current events, naval tactics, electronics, and physics. Carter had prepared for weeks for an interview and sweated through each question as Rickover, never smiling, steadily ratcheted up the difficulty. Then finally he lobbed what seemed like a softball. How did you stand in your class in the Naval Academy? Sir, I stood 59th in a class of 820, Carter said, swelling with pride, but having seen by then generations of America's best military talent. Rickover was not particularly impressed by rank. But did you do your best? He asked the young man. Of course. Carter felt himself rushing to answer, as we all might if asked such a question. But before he could, something inside stopped short. What about the times he had been tired? What about the classes he had been confident enough to get his grades that he could use to coast? What about the questions he had asked himself or he'd been distracted? What about the professors he'd found boring and paid little attention to? What about the extra reading he could have done on weapon systems, on history, on science, or trigonometry? What about the morning PT he'd shuffled through? No, sir, he found himself confessing, I didn't always do my best. And with this, Rickover got up to leave, asking one final question before he departed. Why not? Why didn't you do your best? It was a question that would take many shapes and challenge and inspire the young man in many ways for an entire life. As in, why are you holding back? Why are you half-assing this? Why are you afraid to try? Why don't you think this matters? What could you be capable of and really committed? Capable of if you're really committed. If you're not giving yourself your best, why are you doing it at all? You might think from this exchange that Rickover was a ruthless taskmaster who refused to accept excuses for failure. This is partly correct. His enacting standards for which expected of him and anyone he retired not only transformed the United States into a global power, but it also propelled Carter eventually into the presidency. Still, in a single term, Carter's successes, no foreign wars, a peace settlement between Israel and Egypt, negotiating and ratifying the Panama Canal treaties, normalizing diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China. We were also accompanied by struggles. One such area was in energy policy, where in 1977, addressed to the nation, a forward thinker, Carter declared energy and climate change the moral equivalent to war. Although he knew his proposals were going to be unpopular among the American people, he said it was impossible for me to imagine the bloody legislative battles ahead. He'd fight the war against Congress for his entire term, and he was mocked for putting solar panels on the White House. Despite his efforts and his sincerity, Carter fell short. Rickover, the ruthless taskmaster, nonetheless beamed with pride. There was no question that the public will ultimately understand, and he will be regarded as far-seeing man who has attempted to protect the people of the U.S. He said of Carter's energy efforts, it took about 400 years of the Lord Jesus Christ to have his message accepted. Up to that time, he would be considered a failure. As long as man is trying hard, he can do what he thinks to be right as he success regardless of the outcome. This is the wonderful thing about doing your best. It insults you ever so slightly. From outcomes as well as ego. It's not that you don't care about results, it's that you have a kind of trump card. Your success doesn't go to your head because you're capable of more. Your failures don't destroy because you are sure that there wasn't anything more you could have done. You always control whether you give your best or not. No one can stop you from that. You don't have to end up number one in your class or win everything every time. In fact, not winning is particularly important. What does matter is that you gave everything, because everything is to cheat the gift of your potential, the gift of the opportunity, the gift of your craft you've been introduced to, the gift of the instruction and time of others, the gift of life itself. Ralph Ellison was a student of the Tuskegee Institute when his piano teacher, Hazel Harrison, gave him the gift not just of her time and energy, but also a way of thinking about the obligation that every performer and talented person has. You must always play your best, she had told him, even if it's time in the waiting room at Chehaw Station, because in this country there will always be a little man hidden behind the stove, who knows the music and the tradition and the standards of musicianship required for whatever you set out to perform. Cheehouse Station was the train outside of the campus. The little man behind the stove, that became the artistic consciousness that guided Ellison, like the Rickover standards hovered over Carter, just like the dictum of John Wooden guided his players from day of his first lessons in the basics of putting on a pair of socks. Your best is good enough. Not perfect. Your best. Leave the rest to the scoreboard, to the judges, to the gods, to fate, to the critics. Beyond temperament. Rarely does a person who competes with his head as well as his body come out second. That's 30 minutes up. Rarely does a person who competes with his head as well as his body come out second. Alright, that was day 24. See you day 25. Thank you for watching.